Hello class, welcome back. We're going to go over part 4 of our study of Python lists. Okay, so we're going to talk today about list methods. Remember, a list is an object, and objects can do things, just like the turtle can do things, right? The turtle object. The turtle can move forward, the turtle could go left, the turtle can, change its shape. Methods can do things as well, and we need to learn about what the methods do and what they return, okay? So we have to understand that some methods only return values. Some of the list methods might mutate the list. Some methods do both. They mutate the list and they also return a value. And so it's always important for every single method, not just for lists, but regardless, we always have to understand what goes into the method, what must be supplied as an input, and also what happens when we call the method, what gets returned, and maybe what changes about that object. So we're going to start with methods that return something. List.index. Index is our first method, and it requires an input. And so what it does is it searches for that item within the list, and it returns the index position. It returns an integer of the first place in which it found that item. Now, maybe it doesn't find the item, and if it does not find the item, it gives you a value error. So you want to make sure that if you're going to be using the index method, you want to make sure that this item actually is in the list. Otherwise, your program will just die. List.count. Count is another method, and this will count how many items were found in this list. And in this case, if there are 0, that's fine. Let's look at this example here. My list is here. What is the index of the first 9? The first 9 has been found at position 2. What is the number of 9s I have? Let's see, 1, 2, 3. 3 9s. How many 100s are there? There are no 100s. What is the index location of the first 100? Well, there is no 100, and like I said up here, we get a value error, and the program just dies. Okay, let's look at some more methods. Today, lots of methods. These methods mutate the list. They don't return anything. This is actually, I'm going to highlight this. These methods do not return anything. And so because they don't return anything, you should never do this. You should never say something is equal to list.sort, because sort is one of these mutate only methods that return the value none. And so it's a waste, right? Why? In fact, this is actually probably doing something you did not expect. If you saw this, and if I didn't write this in here, you might have thought, okay, what happens is my sorted list gets kind of returned to here. But actually that's not the case. Nothing, none. The Python none value gets returned. And so this sorted list is nothing. But actually what happens is that the list does get sorted itself, and we don't need that part. And so literally you wouldn't want to put that there at all. So again, just don't do that. This is a no-no. Okay. All right, let's look at some of these methods. Append. Append means add the item to the very end of the list. Now we can also insert at any position we want, where we say insert at this particular location this item. Sort. Sort will sort the list from lowest to highest. Reverse will reverse the items in the list, the ordering of the list. And remove will remove the very first occurrence of that item. And it's okay if that item is not found. If the item is not found, nothing gets removed, and the program just keeps on going. So let's look at some examples. And this is a very key kind of page here. Let's follow this carefully. We're going to insert at position 1 this element, the string new. Okay. That's pretty clear when we print it out. Now let's append new to the very end of the list and then print out the list. Okay, that's fine as well. Now we're going to remove new. And remember what it does is it removes the very first element of new. But remember that remove itself returns nothing. It returns none. So if I were to print out whatever was, if I print out what gets returned by this, it actually does not print out this list. It just prints out the word none. So be careful about that. If I print out my list after I've called mylist.remove, well, in that case, it will kind of do what we expected it to do, where it shows that this new had been removed. Let's do that one more time. Print remove dot, or sorry, not print, just mylist.remove. Notice this is how you would normally execute it. You would never really print this out because it doesn't work. So we just say mylist.remove, which will mutate my list and just remove this word. And then when we print it out, it'll print out 675. Notice here, sorted list equals mylist.sort. Again, this is one of those cases you don't want to do it. This is bad code because the sort method returns nothing, returns none. So if I print out the sorted list, what I thought might be 5, 6, and 7 is not. It prints out none. But if I print out my list is 5, 6, 7. Okay. Lastly, reverse, which will mutate this list. And what I would do is I would just kind of maybe write it in my notes over here. It would become 7, 6, 5. And then we print it out, and that's what we get printed out. Okay? Now let's look at some methods that both mutate and return a value. The pop method will remove and return at the same time the last item in the list. I could optionally give this method an input, a number. And in this case, where position is a number like 0, 1, 2, it's an index value. It removes as well as returns the item that happened to be at that position. So, my list is here. If I were to pop something from my list, it's going to take the 100 and return it to num as well as delete it. Then when we print it out, num is 100. My list got mutated. Let's do it again, but instead this time we're going to pop 0. So 0 is this element right here. The 1 gets returned. We print out the 1 and print out my list. It's 2, 3, 100. Next topic I want to talk about is this idea of appending. You might wonder, why do I have an append method? Because I've already learned how to do concatenation. And so why, look, I could do plus 10, which is the same thing as adding 10 to the very end of my list. So why would I use the pen when I could just do it like this? The reason why is they're not the same. Whenever we concatenate, concatenation will actually create a brand new list. Kind of like with strings. Strings did the same thing. When you concatenate, you're actually not changing the string, you're creating a new string. So let's look at an example. My list, 1, 2. So I diagrammed that right here. I have this object list with a 1 and a 2. I have the variable that points to that object. Now I'm going to say alias is equal to my list, so a variable alias is also pointing to that same thing. And now I'm going to append a 3 to my list. And so here's my list, and I'm going to mutate it and add a value to the end of it. And so if I print out my list and the alias, they're going to be the same. They point to the same object. In fact, my list and alias, they are the same. Let's see what happens when I concatenate instead of append. When I concatenate, let's look at the right-hand side first. My list plus 4 concatenated with this list that has 4. Look what happens here. A brand new list is made. Concatenation creates a new list that has all of these plus the concatenated piece as well. So that's just the right-hand side. And now I'm saying my list is equal to that. So my list right here is going to point to this new list that we made. So now when I print out my list, it's going to print out something different than the alias. They're two separate objects. And this is really to highlight the fact that concatenation creates a new list. All right, give this a try. I'm going to pause, or you should pause here. And I'm going to go over this right now. So we started off with an empty list, and then we concatenate 1 and 5 to it, and we print it out. We're now going to append 0 to the end of it, so that's pretty straightforward. Now we're going to sort. Now remember, when we sort, the list will get mutated, but at the same time, nothing gets returned. None gets returned. So when I print this out, when I print out the sorted list itself, it will print out the word none, even though my list did get modified. Now I'm going to print out my list. Does it find a 5, or where does it find a 5? Let's see, 0, 1, 2. At position 2, it found the 5. Remember, index returns a number. Okay, my list, insert 1000 at position 1. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to insert the number 1000. And you can see that we printed out here, so it prints out there. Now, watch this. My list.append. Stick 20 at the very end. So notice what I'm doing here. I'm just going to write it right here. And then remember, append is one of those methods that don't return anything. So nothing gets returned, none. And when I print out my new list, well, it's really not a list. It's just the value none. Now, my list did change, and so I put a little note right here. My list pop, I'm going to take away the third element. So pop 3 and return that. So when I print out, I do print out the 5. And when I print out my list, it prints out the final list without the 5 in it. Okay, make sure you understand this. This one's a tricky one. I would repeat this again later on if you didn't get quite the right thing. Maybe tomorrow come back and try to do the same thing and see if you get the right answer. Okay, class, that's it for today. We'll continue on with part 5 next time.